Um, I'm going to give it over to Sarah. Thank you, guys.
MLK Jr., also known as Martin Luther King Jr., a civil rights leader and also the face of a movement. With this came the understanding and the responsibility that came with leading people in a goal and desire to meet a mutual agreement as a representative of the people. Welcome back, everyone. This is Medium Team, and we're just like to start off today with telling you this is speech 3 out of 4 of the presidential candidate speeches. First, we've heard from Trump and his candidate team, and we've also heard from Ms. Obama's team. Now today, we're just going to take a quick look at Martin Luther King Jr.'s team. Just to start off with background knowledge of Martin Luther King, he is a well-educated man, and he also has a very strong religious moral compass. And this also may be why he's known to take a stand in things he believes in. And that's probably why he had a very active role in this civil rights movement. But this all comes down to the voters. At the ultimate end of today, we're going to just hear we're just going to hear out Martin Luther King Jr. team today. And we're going to see if we think Martin Luther King Jr.'s team is going to have the right potential for making him the candidate of the job. If he's going to be the best candidate, he'll take your vote with what they have to tell you with his information. And with all that being said, I'd like to give it over to their team to present their information on why they think Martin Luther King is going to be the best candidate out there.
As a media group, we believe that educating ourselves and others about the importance and history of voting is essential. The right to vote is the foundation of any democracy. The U.S. Constitution did not specifically say who could vote, only how we would. With this gap, the states used this to their advantage and only allowed white landowning men to vote. It wasn't until 1869 where the 15th Amendment granted African American men to vote, and the year 1919 where the 19th Amendment allowed women to vote. But even still, this privilege was mostly only granted for white women in particular. One thing I think many tend to forget is how it took even longer for indigenous people to be granted the right to vote. And there are still specific restrictions which continue to make it difficult for them. Your political participation, such as voting, is extremely important because one decision can make a significant change. The leaders you decide to vote or elect, whether at a federal, state, or even county level, these leaders have the abilities to control the policies and consequences you and your families have to live with every single day, from the taxes you pay to the water quality and the air we breathe. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." And now that we've discussed the importance and history of voting, the following group will advocate for their candidate, Martin Luther King Jr.
Martin Luther King Jr. might be dead, but he certainly isn't done with making a change. We will delve deeper into why you, as a respectable, eager voter, should vote for our candidate, what Martin Luther King Jr. really believes, and restating the strengths of our candidate. Throughout this project and us promoting our candidate, we haven't really explained our candidate's political stance. We're going to explain where our candidate stands politically and what he represents. We'll explain the core values of our candidate's beliefs and more about his policies. Then we will talk about our candidate's plans and compare it directly to the other candidates. This will be about the other candidates' policies and why we think you should vote Martin Luther King Jr. over the other candidates. Finally, we will talk briefly about one of Martin Luther King Jr.'s core policies in this campaign, working on better education for everyone, regardless of financial background. People might have concerns about Martin Luther King Jr. Running, but after tonight, we're confident we will have addressed those concerns and hopefully convinced you to vote for our candidate over the others.
Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15, 1929. Unfortunately, he was assassinated on April 4, 1968. However, he's made a huge impact in today's society, but he is certainly not done making a change in today's society. Martin Luther King Jr. would have been an excellent candidate because of his beliefs and the strains he had to fight. Martin Luther King Jr. was a social activist and Baptist minister who played a key role in the American civil rights movement from the middle of 1950s to his assassination in 1968. King fought for equal and human rights of African Americans, the economically disadvantaged, and victims of injustice through a peaceful protest. Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream. King called for civil and economic rights of an end to racism in the United States.
You're muted. Isaiah, you're muted.
My bad. Sorry about that. Uh, King is a standout figure, and it's important to keep in mind not only what he brings to the table, but who and what he represents. Our slogan, love for humans and love for humanity, it implies two things, both humanitarian themes and a strong love. King doesn't really keep to a strong political ideology like the Democrats or Republicans, but his love ethic keeps him propelled to make sure he does the right thing when looking after the communities. Our society is divided into communities, some of which are upper class and majority groups, and our system supports these groups. So naturally, the power will systematically drift towards these more privileged classes. Historically speaking, time and time again, we've gone over waves of civil rights movements, waves for feminism, waves for color, for ethnic injustice, waves for workers' rights, and all of which never really happened because of the government. They happened because people like King work and protest and organize so that the government listens and pushes the government's hand. King and his party wishes to kind of bring back these democratic ideals so that it doesn't have to be such a push from the people to get heard and to get the support that they need. And King wishes to bring these democratic ideals with his love ethic because of the entire population feels the same amount of power and the same voice that is heard. Sorry, thank you.
Hey guys, today I'm going to be telling you about why Martin Luther King would have been the best presidential candidate for the United States. We all know him for his dedication and his nonviolent struggle for civil rights, specifically for African Americans in the US. But first, let me tell you why the other candidates aren't the best option for the US. First, starting off with Donald Trump. He has a history of corruption and racism. Although Trump has never filed for personal bankruptcy, businesses of his, like casino and hotels, have declared bankruptcy about 6 times between 1991 and 2009 because of his inability to meet required payments and debt with the banks. During Trump's first 100 days in office, and time again, benefited corporations and the wealthy at the expense of ordinary Americans. Firstly, raising housing payments for new home buyers about $500 in 2017. On its first day, the Trump administration reversed an Obama administration action to lower federal housing. This could have lowered mortgage payments for 1 million households for purchasing and or refinancing. Trump also supported economic policies that are harmful to communities of color. Many of the budget cuts proposed by President Trump would cut key social service programs. Sorry. About 41% of the 9 million, including women, infants, and children, are people of color. Later, it was found that he supported education policies that do not support students of color. Trump pushed EPA to eradicate programs dedicated to reducing exposure to lead paint, which sadly is known to affect communities of color. The EPA also cut funding for Environmental Justice Office, which specifically was known for dealing with lead, pollution, and other issues facing Black communities today. My candidate, Martin Luther King, would not stand for many of the injustice Trump has pulled. And on to my next candidate. Firstly, Kamala Harris is a Democrat, and these are just a couple reasons why some Americans don't agree with her actions. Issues with Kamala Harris grew as she was assigned the lead on immigration. She manages the migrant crisis at the southern border, and when voters were asked about their opinion, only 35% of her voters approved that the administration immigrant policies. The majority, 54%, believe that the administration is creating an open border rather than enforcing immigration laws more humanely. When managing the policies, it's known to be a lot, for any vice president, but Harrison also definitely had missteps. But even at the very least, she struggles to communicate with the administration and position on the immigration and migrant control. This has led to her being the face of the crisis. With all that being said, I feel Martin Luther King could have better handled being president rather than the rest, because he knows the ultimate measurement of a man is not where he stands in moment of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at the time of challenges and controversy, end quote.
So you've heard a lot about Martin Luther King Jr. and the other candidates, but to talk about one of his main policies in this campaign is working on education for everyone. Not everyone is given the same opportunities for good education just based on their financial position. And Martin Luther King Jr. intends to work on that so that good education is accessible to everyone regardless of their background. Now, okay. You've been told why exactly our candidate is better suited for president than the others. Martin Luther King Jr. has been making change throughout history, and once elected president, he plans on continuing the dream of a better America. While the other candidates might claim promises made, promises kept, we can make the difference, or that together we can achieve more than before, Martin Luther King Jr. doesn't make empty promises. And with our slogan, love for humans, love for humanity, he's not exaggerating. And that's because Martin Luther King Jr. has already stated his dream, and he didn't wait to be elected president to make long-lasting, massive change in America. Once elected president, Martin Luther King Jr. will continue his long history of pursuing his dream of a better America, and because of his past, you can be assured he's not making false claims to just get elected. Martin Luther King Jr. might be dead, but his influence in modern America is very much alive.
Thank you to the Martin Luther King Jr. campaign. I'm Ronnie from the media group. As we reflect on what we heard today, I wanted to give you a brief recap on King's great debate statements. King showed his support for climate change, the Equality Act, stated he was pro-life, vowed to fix immigration issues. He also promised to legalize cannabis and help with police reform. King said he would expand social security, and he also stands with Ukraine. And as Monica talked about the importance of voting in its history, I wanted to remind everyone that in a democratic society, it is important to make your voice heard. And it's always good to be engaged, which is why we are here, listening to the candidates to make informed choices about the future. So far, we have heard from Donald Trump, Michelle Obama, and now Martin Luther King Jr. Tomorrow, we will hear from the Kamala Harris campaign, and then it will be time to vote before you know it. So will Martin Luther King Jr. be making the change too? We will soon find out. Thank you.
Yay. Okay, great job. I loved how your group took the slogans of the other candidates and kind of used them against them and talked about how he would, truly do his slogan where they wouldn't be able to, whatever. That was very creative. I would encourage you to make sure that you're kind of journaling how you felt like tonight went, just so it's fresh in your mind. You're going to have to do that next week when you do your processing for the other groups and do the critiques of the other groups. So just while everything's fresh in your mind, just kind of put a note on what worked, what didn't work, where you felt like you had strengths and where you felt like you needed improvements. I will be posting these videos again as quickly as possible after I get them all recorded tomorrow. And you will have a chance to watch them as you're doing your papers as well. Any questions as we end today's presentation? Okay, so tomorrow at 10:30 is our last presentation. If you want to come, great. If not, I will record it and I'll post it to the class as soon as I can. Go have a good night.
Good night.
All right, thanks.
Right.
All right.